Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GM. It is your guy Boulanger. Up next, crisis to crisis. Do me a quick favor, hit like. If it is your first time checking out the GM, hit subscribe. Also hit the notification bell so that you get updates when we upload new content. Let's talk about it. So here we are again in 2024 in a very similar situation as the 2023 off season in a roster crisis. Belanger, why would you call it a roster crisis? Well, if we go back one calendar year, we were in a situation with our roster where we had no quarterback, right? And we understood that we had a franchise guy on the team, but at the conclusion of last season, he was literally off the team. He was literally a free agent. And the speculation was that they would franchise tag him if a long term deal had been reached when free agency began, or right before free agency, that is. They absolutely franchise tagged him. And everything else that offseason would depend on if the Baltimore Ravens would sign Lamar Jackson. And we went through March, no contract. We went all the way up until the draft before the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson actually reached a contract. When you don't have a quarterback on your roster and you're not a rebuilding team, that is a roster crisis. And I think that the Baltimore Ravens have habitually put themselves in these type of crisis situations when it comes to building a roster, with understanding that money is always an issue. You know, how much a person or a player rather is taking up of cap space, what their value is. All those things are super, super important. But the part of the reason why last year in 2023 was a roster crisis was simply because we didn't have a quarterback, but we had a franchise quarterback in waiting. And because that particular quarterback had not signed a long term deal, some free agents that we may have had an opportunity to sign went elsewhere. All right. We did get things together, we did build a roster, and we did have a really good season. But here we are in 2024 with a roster crisis. And this is part of the reason why this administration for the Baltimore Ravens should be on the clock. You see, let's take into consideration Patrick Queen was eligible for a 5th year option and they didn't pick it up. That's the cheapest Patrick Queen would have played on any contract after his rookie deal expired. So even before his 5th year option wasn't picked up, Patrick Queen had been ascending every single year in his career, even to the point where Mike Tomlin says about 3 years ago that Patrick Queen was the best linebacker in the AFC. So how can Mike Tomlin see Patrick Queen's ascension and ability, but the Baltimore Ravens ignore it, even to the point to picking up a cheap 5th year option? And that's the kind of stuff that you see the Ravens do in this Lamar Jackson era. We continue to create these roster crises, and it's unnecessary, right? When they were working on a deal and they signed Broderick Washington, they should have just pushed pause on that and simply worked on a deal for Meta BK. It would have been much cheaper to work out a deal that was suitable for both sides than it would be to allow him to receive All Pro nomination, right? And then try to sign him. His money is going to go exponentially higher. But here we are, no 5th year option for Patrick Queen, no contract for Meta BK. Both of those guys are going to hit free agency. One of them will be franchise tagged, probably Meta BK. Now, granted, nobody saw Geno Stone coming. If you sit and say that you saw Geno Stone breaking out this season, you're telling a story. Okay. So that's kind of expected that he wouldn't have been signed. Um, when we look at the offense side of the ball, you know, uh, we've allowed that offensive line to become unproductive. I'll just use that as a term. They've just been unproductive. Lamar Jackson allows them to look better with his ability to scramble and his ability to get out of harm's way than they've really been. Uh, Wide receiver, um, a lot more questions than answers, and running back questions over answers. And so when we take a step back, there's some defensive roster crisis going on, and there's certainly some offensive roster crisis going on. So let's talk about what we need. Okay. Now, of course, we don't have a lot of cap space. The next video you will see from me will be talking about cap casualties and things of that nature. So we don't have a lot of cap space at all. We have just enough money probably to sign our draft picks. So somebody will have to go. There's no question that somebody will have to go, and there will also be some contracts that need to be restructured. But when we look at what we need, whether draft or free agency, okay, we need um, at least one left tackle. We need at least one guard, and we need at least one upgraded running back. All three of those positions need upgrades. Okay. When we look outside, we need at least two upgrades at wide receiver. We do have Zay. Bateman's coming back. I'm 100% okay with them letting OBJ walk. I know he was a good leader, all those kind of things. But leadership without production doesn't mean a whole lot to me. So I'm certainly okay if they let him walk, but that means we need to both address wide receiver in free agency and also in the draft. So wide receiver is also a need. When we look at the defense side of the ball, I think that when we look interior defensive line, the question mark with Justin Metabike certainly means we have a need at defensive tackle, and that's a need at defensive tackle whether we re-sign Metabike or not. We still need some defensive tackle depth because we have depth behind Michael Pierce with Travis Jones. When we look at outside linebacker, I think that position is in a crisis, and we have big needs there, right? Odafe Owe, up until this point, has not shown yet that he can be a true get to the quarterback pass rusher. He's solid in run defense. He's pretty decent in setting the edge, but we have yet to really see that he can get after the quarterback. He has all the athletic tools to do so, but we just don't see it. Now, I know that there's been talk that he's constantly held and all those kind of things, but I think a part of that is if you're constantly being held, then you have to do what you need to do to get those holding penalties called, right? See, if you don't jump off the page, the referees have no reason to look in your direction. Um, so we definitely have a need at outside linebacker. I don't think Calvin Noy comes back. Um, Jadeveon Clowney, I've seen some contract projections. I think he could be affordable, but you don't want Jadeveon Clowney being your main pass rusher. David Ajabo, I have no expectation that he's going to do anything. I don't have any expectation. We've basically seen him in one game in 2 seasons, which is another which is another thing that gets us in these roster crisis with this administration is that we do a lot of draft to wait and see. David Ajabo, excuse me, David Ajabo was clearly a draft pick, too high of a draft pick to be a wait and see. And then we had Voorhees, who they drafted last year, late round pick, but that's still a wait and see. And so I don't have any expectation for David Ajabo. So really, when it comes down to it, you have a young guy in Tavius Robinson who showed a lot of promise last year, showed some good things, and then you have Odafe Owe, which means we need an upgrade at that position. Will we go big game hunting at that position? I don't know if we'll create enough cap space to be able to do so. When we look at the linebacker position, big question mark for Patrick Queen. Uh, will they franchise tag him? Will they reach a deal? He's probably somewhere in that 4 year, 72 to $80 million range. And I just don't know if they will foot the bill for that price tag. So the question is, can Trenton Simpson step into that role? I don't expect him to be Patrick Queen, but can he step into that role and use his speed and use his athleticism and kind of fill in that gap, fill in that void that's been created? He does have all the athletic traits. In fact, if you remember the video that I did before the draft, in fact, I did it before the draft and said Trenton Simpson would be a perfect Patrick Queen replacement, and then they end up drafting Trent Simpson. So I think he has the ability, but will he put that ability on the field? That's the question. With Malik Harrison being a free agent, I think that the Baltimore Ravens may need to look to the draft to pick up a young, talented depth piece, just in case Simpson don't pan out and or they don't get a low cost deal done with Harrison. Uh, so I think we have a need at depth, not a need in the starting positions, but I think we definitely have a need to build depth there. When we jump to the secondary, I think Geno Stone is the most likely that the Ravens can get a deal done, an affordable deal done. I've seen some contract projections, and it's only looking like I think it was 3 years, 22 million, 4 years, 26 million, something like that. I can't remember exactly the numbers, but it was super affordable. And I think that he's probably the most likely that they can get a deal done with as a next year full-time replacement for Marcus Williams. I do expect them to move off of Marcus Williams' contract next year. You'll see that in my cap casualty video that's coming up probably Sunday. Um, but I think they also need to draft some young talent at the position, especially if they don't get a deal done with Geno Stone. I think it's time to put Darius Washington um, out of the Ravens' future. Um, he's been productive when he's been available, but he has not been much available. And I don't think he's under contract this year. If he is, keep him. If he's not, then I don't think you spend money to retain his services unless you can get him in that $1 million range. So I think we have a need for depth at safety. And then, of course, cornerback, there's certainly a crisis there as well. A lot of our corners are free agents. So the only thing we can really rely on is Brandon Stevens. Can he put on another season like he did last year? If the Ravens believe that he can, this is the offseason to give him an extension. Don't let him ball out again and then try to extend him next year. He's going to cost too much. So this is the season, if they really believe in Brandon Stevens, to get a deal done. I think Marlon Humphrey, I think that if not this year, he's a next year cap casualty. But I think that he needs to move more of a slot. At this point in his career, he can't stay healthy, and you have to find a way um, to to use him because you're paying him. But outside corner, the main coverage guy, I think he can no longer really be productive in that role. I think it's time to draft a big, strong, fast corner to replace him. So, man, all over this roster, man, it's a crisis because we have so many needs. And part of those needs we could have already taken care of. But this administration has had a habit of dropping the ball, and that's what it looks like in this offseason. So listen, man, let me know what you guys want me to know, man. Do you guys believe that we have a roster crisis very similar to 2023? And where do you guys see we need upgrades and depth pieces? So listen, I'm your guy Boulanger. This is the GM, man. Stay tuned, man. I got a lot of good content, man. I got the cap casualty video coming this weekend. I got the Lamar Jackson contract value coming probably Sunday or Monday, and then I got a lot of free agency content, coming into next week. So man, just stay tuned, man. I appreciate you guys for hanging with us.